Good morning. At the beginning of our European project named Transculturae, the transfer of cultural objects to Alpe Adria region during the 20th century, we immediately recognized the importance to dedicate part of our research project to the issue of the misappropriation, dispossession of the Jewish cultural object during the Nazi-fascist era. Only in a second phase of our project, let's say a really recent phase of our project, we also understood the importance to include it in our study, the dispossession of Judaica, conserved in Italian synagogue. I'm part of the Italian team. As you know, there are three generally recognized categories of Judaica: archival material, books, and ceremonial objects. We approached to the Judaica issue in the same way we did with private collection. We tried to point out in which way Judaica were taken account, were considered during and before the war by fascist authority, local fascist authority, and also the central state. And especially how was considered Judaica by the superintendencies. Superintendencies are the offices within a ministry at that time on national education. Today it's cultural heritage, that are responsible on the territory for the conservation of the cultural heritage. At this point we have a sort of work to try to understand, to develop exactly how, which historical, artistic, and cultural value was given to the Judaica before and during the war. This consideration laid out for the treatment that Judaica had during the war in Italy, in terms of protection, seizure, confiscation, dispossession, and then recovery in the after-war. On November 15, 1972, a report of the Jewish, it's a PDF type. Okay. A report on the Jewish cultural heritage under the fascists was sent by Luisa Mortaro Tolenghi, advisor of the Italian Union of the Jewish Community, to the Office for the Recovery of the Artworks within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Cultural Heritage. The report named, we can translate something like Events of Jewish Artistic Heritage during the Fascism, shortly described the events that determined looting and loss of Judaica conserved in the Jewish Italian communities. 1 year later, a second report was sent about the libraries and historical archives. The main problem stressed out by the two relations was that the Judaica, firstly, have not been catalogued in the year before the war. We have just exception, that is the case of Livorno, where all the objects that were conserved in the Museum of Livorno, the Jewish Museum of Livorno, were invented in 1931, and we have also some photos of that object that are very important, and the description as well. Or again, in other cases, the catalog, the inventories, the register with a session of, especially of the donate object, was looted, destroyed, pulped during the war. This is the case of the Jewish community of Trieste. The relation of Mortaro Tolenghi also pointed out the importance of the importance of the Jewish community before the war as protection, and which type of protection established on their heritage. We have precise information. In the case of the library of the synagogue of Mantua, the library was established in the middle of the 18th century. After a series of laws, the Jewish that took place in the second half of the 19th century, the Jewish community of Mantua decided to give in custody to the public library of the city, Biblioteca Teresiana, a large group of manuscripts and books. The agreement was signed between the city of Mantua and the Jewish community of Mantua in 1931. This cultural heritage was composed of 1,549 printed books and 162 manuscripts dated from 15th to 18th century, was safeguarded during the war together with the precious Estense Codex. And today is still conserved in the Biblioteca Teresiana under the label Biblioteca Comunità Ebraica di Mantua. This Jewish library is now protected by law, was restored, inventoried, digitalized and exhibited in the last 20 years between Europe and United States. Mantova is not an isolated case. The Jewish community of Reggio Emilia gave in custody the small part of its historical archive, again dated beginning of 18th century, to the State Archive of the city in 1909. So let's say that after this autonomous action of safeguarding the heritage made by the Italian Jewish community, only on June 11, 1940, one day after that Italy entered in the war, the Union of the Jewish Community sent a circular inviting all the communities to take care about their heritage, to protect their heritage, to find safe, as it's presumably safe place where to protect their heritage. And for heritage, it's written, ceremonial object, archival material, books, and museum object. This declaration ended with one thing that's pretty important. The object has to be safeguarded from the enemy air raid. That is the first phase of protection in Italy. The worries of the Union of the Jewish community was the same worries of the superintendents and the Minister of National Education. It was the bombing, the air raid. It was not confiscation, looting, and so on and so forth. So this is absolutely, this circular in line with what these superintendents were sent at that time to the institution holding cultural properties. So let's see what the Jewish community did it to protect their heritage. If they followed this circular, that is a sort of recommendation. In Florence, in general, the most precious sort of way was made a selection of the ceremonial object were hidden in the countryside. The same things also were done by the private collection, or in secure hideouts, such as in the case of the Historical Archive of the Jewish Community of Trieste, that they have documental material dated beginning of 17 and end of 19. And always this Jewish community of Trieste instead decided to give in custody to the Archbishop of Trieste the diploma of Maria Theresa of Austria with the original print to be safeguarded, all these things returning afterward. In Florence, the so-called treasure of the synagogue, as it was called by the press at the time during the war and after the war, was packed by the Jewish community in crates and were transferred in two different locations in the Tuscan countryside. One, it was in the villa of Giorgio Forti in Prato, and the other one in another villa up to the hills of Florence. Unfortunately, in the most of the case, like in Florence, for example, the hideouts were easily discovered by the fascists that immediately looted or confiscated the contents of the crates. Such happened in the case of the Jewish community of Turin. Turin was bombed on an enemy raid, let's say, on November 20, 1942. The synagogue was completely destroyed, and all the Judaica that were hidden in the basement in different crates was then looted. We're talking about quite 200 pieces of ancient and having also artistic value pieces of ceremonial object, and also 40,000 volumes of books dated 15th and 17th century. Just, I think, the 5% return after the war to the Jewish community of Turin. This is, you can see in the left side, you have a sort of draft of the books. It's a list of the books that were looted. And you have many annotation, and some books were erased because then it was able to find in another place, and so on and so forth. We have pages of the list. While the Judaica was removed to be safeguarded, the fascists began to vandalize the synagogue by burning them, demolishing the furnishing, and this took place, many places in Italy. Ferrara, September 1941, Split, June 1942, Trieste, July 1942, and Padua, where the fascists set fire in May 1943. In Padua, the synagogue was completely destroyed in May 1943, and all the furniture inside was burned. And quite 1 year later also, the Judaica was looted by the fascists with a collaboration with the Nazi, and all objects having clearly artistic and cultural value, including this menorah, his height 1 meter, end of 16th, beginning of 17th century. And it's interesting because in the report that the Jewish community made in afterward to the police, there are two lists, all the objects and all the items that were destroyed by the fire and what instead was looted by the fascists and the Nazis. About Ferrara, there are many documents relating to the attack to the synagogue. The account of events is well exposed in a report drafted down by the Community Council on September 29, 1941, a few days after the attack. I'm quoting. The holy services at the temple has just finished, and the faithful have hardly left the building when people coming from a political meeting and from a demonstration in the main square broke down the doors to get into our holy place of worship. Furniture was smashed and the sacred Torah was thrown on the floor. Lamps were broken and an attempt made to destroy every single object. This photo is not related to the devastation of September 1941, but to the devastation of August 1944. The synagogues of Ferrara suffered many attacks by the fascists between 1941 and 1944. This is the result of the last attack, let's say. There is also detailed information about the attack suffered by the Temple of Trieste in July 1942. And what is interesting in the report that was made by the head of the Jewish community to the police a few days later is what he wrote at the end of this report. I'm quoting. Behind calculation in moral terms, the damage cannot as yet been assisted in material terms because it's also involved an object, a furnishing of artistic worth, which it will be not easy to replace. The fascist government of the Italian Social Republic, which was set up on September 1943, would issue provision first for the sequestration of the Jewish property, November 30, 1943, and then for complete confiscation is the decree number 2, January 4, 1944. In between these two dates, it issued specific provision for the confiscation of Judaica offered by the Jewish communities. The formal extension to Jewish bodies and organization of such confiscation came with an order issued to all the heads of the province. It was the prefecture of the time, changed the name with the Italian Social Republic, by the chief of police and dated January 28, 1944. This state that all Jewish community are to be disbanded and their property sequestered. 7 days later, the chief of police also gave orders to investigate the fate of the works of art that had been in the synagogue. After the issue of these two police orders, as you can imagine, Judaica started to be confiscated all over the country. In the most of the cases, confiscation was just an excuse for a systematic looting. The Nazi fascists soon illegally trade Judaica. The most precious pieces were sold to art dealers and antiquities, especially in the north of Italy. Milan is the capital of the black market. And again, for example, in the case of Trieste, Judaica, where the part of the archival material was pulped by the Nazi, or in other cases, especially always the documental material, were sold to local shopkeepers, like in the case of Gorizia, where the paper of the archives were used to wrap the food in the local market. In Turin, it was not enough the bombing and the looting. The parchment then were sold by the fascists with the collaboration with the Nazi in Tunis. We have the trade of the afterwards, so this event is pretty clear. To shoemaker to rely source for sleeper and also for bags. At the end of the war, some people returned bags made with Jewish parchment. In Trieste, soon the synagogue was confiscated by Nazi authority and it was transformed in a warehouse where all the libraries and the artworks confiscated by Nazi from the Jewish houses in Trieste and its province, we are talking about 1,600 houses were confiscated, were stored there. Together with all these assets, also the library of the Jewish community of Trieste was stored in the Trieste synagogue. And the most part of this book was then transferred by the Nazi to Klagenfurt in Austria. After the liberation, only few books returned from Austria. During the confiscation process, I'm quite finished. During the confiscation process that took place around all the country, the superintendents had not so much power, let's say. In some cases, tried to intervene to avoid the dispersion of this cultural heritage, especially when it was really considered outstanding heritage. This is the case of Florence, Parma, Vercelli, where the superintendents, the ministers of cultural heritage, imposed the authority to the prefecture, so the Minister of Interiors, to safeguard the Judaica. In this case, all these objects and all this heritage returned to the rightful Jewish community. As I mentioned you before, in the afterward, in the fall of the case, just few books and few ceremonial objects returned to the Jewish community. And it's just a smaller part in comparison of what they lost. And I think that the loss of the Jewish community of Turin is emblematic, is the best example to understand how much was extended the dispossession of Judaica in Italy. I would like to finish my speech to show you this publication, 1995, published by Minister of Cultural Heritage, and Minister for Foreign Affairs, where they listed l'opera da ritrovare. It's translated in English with treasure and trace, something like that, so you can find also the English version. And they are listed all the artwork, the objects were looted and missed from the Second World War. We have objects from museums, public galleries, private collection, churches, monastery. No one Judaica is listed here. I think now it's time. It's time to add Judaica in the framework of the Second World War in Italy and what was lost and what was looted. Also because, as I tried to show you, that so-called looted Judaica, let's say, it was absolutely part of the extraordinary heritage that reached Italy before Second World War. Thank you.